There comes a moment when you stare at your life and ask, how did I get here? The noise, the worry, the endless cycle of problems. It becomes so loud that you forget you still have power. But what if I told you that your breakthrough is not in fixing the past, but in how you choose to look forward? This isn't just a speech. It's a wake-up call, a deep, honest conversation about reclaiming your life by shifting one powerful habit. Stop feeding the problem and start feeding the solution. We are drawn to problems because problems demand our attention. They announce themselves with urgency, with a kind of chaotic allure that overwhelms the senses and dominates our internal dialogue. There is a neurobiological mechanism at play here. Your brain, tasked with keeping you alive, becomes hypersensitive to anything it perceives as a threat, as disorder, as a deviation from what should be. And so the problem becomes the center of gravity. It absorbs you. You ruminate. You catastrophize. You imagine every worst-case scenario and rehearse them endlessly, as though worrying hard enough might yield control. But the tragedy in that thinking is this. The more you feed the problem with your attention, the more real, the more terrifying, the more defining it becomes. You begin to believe that your identity is wrapped up in it. You aren't dealing with a problem anymore. You are the problem. But here's the thing. Your capacity to orient yourself toward a solution is what distinguishes order from chaos, strength from victimhood, meaning from suffering. The solution often doesn't roar. It whispers. It sits in the corner of your awareness, modest and calm, asking only that you take a single step forward. But in order to hear it, you have to stop yelling at the chaos. You have to stop letting your emotions sit in the driver's seat and instead become conscious of where your attention is being hijacked. You can be right about how unfair it all is, how overwhelming, how undeserved, and still you'll stay stuck. Or you can decide that being free, being whole, being better matters more than being justified in your suffering. That's a profound transformation. That's the moment you stop trying to win the argument with the past and instead begin negotiating with the future. You don't need to solve everything at once. In fact, you can't. Life doesn't work like that. But you can pick up the corner of the burden that's closest to you. You can identify one thing, one conversation, one habit, one decision, and move toward it with clarity. That's how you start. Because life isn't lived in sweeping resolutions. It's lived in the daily courage to act in spite of your fear, in defiance of your helplessness. The chaos wants to convince you that you're powerless. The truth is that you're more powerful than you realize, but only when you shift your gaze from the pit to the path. And there's something else. We wait. We wait for the right time. We wait for enough courage. We wait for someone else to make the first move. But life punishes delay. Waiting is a form of submission. You believe you're protecting yourself from pain, but really, you're deepening it. You sit in the discomfort because it's familiar. You postpone the hard conversation because it's terrifying. You stay in the toxic situation because at least you know the rules there. But this is the lie, that knowing pain is safer than risking the unknown. It's not. Stagnation is death in disguise. The longer you delay, the more your internal voice weakens, and the more your environment begins to shape you instead of the other way around. People say they want closure, but closure is a myth. Life doesn't hand you a tidy explanation tied up with a bow. You rarely get to understand why someone hurt you, why it fell apart, why it didn't work. And even when you do, it doesn't change the outcome. What you can get is clarity, the kind that comes from movement, from decision, from acting in alignment with your values, even if your heart is still bleeding. Waiting for emotional readiness is a trap. You may never feel ready to walk away, to start over, to confront the truth. But readiness isn't the point. Action is. You act because you know staying stuck is slowly killing your spirit. You act because something deeper inside you, perhaps the faintest whisper of your true self, demands that you live, not merely endure. And the remarkable thing is, the moment you act, no matter how small the step, you change your identity. You're no longer the person who is being acted upon by life. You become the actor. You become the one who is capable of confronting suffering, not being consumed by it. And that's when you begin to climb. You don't need to see the entire staircase. You don't need a roadmap to the top. You just need to take one deliberate step. And then another. And then another. That's how people escape the gravity of despair. That's how you go from being the victim of your life to its architect. Through action. Through choosing clarity over closure. Through the courage to move, even when your hands are shaking. Rumination is the silent killer of potential. It masquerades as problem-solving, disguising itself as introspection, as reflection, as some noble journey into self-understanding. But it's not. It's paralysis wrapped in the illusion of effort. You sit there, playing the same memory over and over again, dissecting every word that was said, every gesture, every moment where it all went wrong. And while you think you're gaining insight, what you're really doing is reinforcing the emotional weight of that memory. You're carving it deeper into your neurological patterns, teaching your brain to stay addicted to the pain of it. You become emotionally fused to the past, and the more you revisit it, the more it defines you. You're not learning from it. You're drowning in it. This isn't to say that reflection has no place. Of course it does. But reflection has a direction. It seeks resolution. Rumination has no endpoint. It loops. It feeds on your need for certainty in a world that often offers none. And when you're in that loop, what you're really doing is avoiding something: action, change, confrontation. The deep, difficult work of accepting what is and doing something about it. That work is painful. It's terrifying, but it's the only thing that transforms pain into progress. So what do you do instead? You replace rumination with ritual. Not mindless routine, but deliberate, disciplined acts that pull you out of your head and back into life. Ritual is structure. It's the antidote to chaos. A morning walk isn't just exercise. It's a declaration that your body is worth moving, your breath worth deepening. Journaling at night isn't just writing. It's you telling your story on your terms, organizing your thoughts instead of letting them run wild. Acts of service aren't distractions. They're recalibrations, reminders that your existence has value, that others benefit when you show up. Rituals don't solve the problem overnight, but they stabilize the vessel. They give you ground to stand on. And in times of deep emotional pain, having something solid beneath you, even if it's just your daily tea at 7 a.m. or 5 minutes of silence, can mean the difference between falling apart and holding it together long enough to heal. This is not about controlling everything. It's about reclaiming what you can control. You may not be able to change the way someone treated you, the opportunity that passed, the years you lost. But you can control how you show up now. You can choose not to spiral. You can choose not to hand over your mental bandwidth to thoughts that devour your strength and offer nothing in return. Your mind is not your enemy, but it can become one when you let it operate without guidance. And ritual is that guidance. It anchors you. It reminds you day after day that you are a person with agency, with routines, with structure. And structure is what holds up a life, even when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And this brings us to a fundamental truth. Language shapes reality. The words you use, both in conversation and in the private chambers of your mind, create the lens through which you interpret your life. If you constantly describe your situation in terms of being stuck, broken, lost, hopeless, then you begin to live those words. You adopt the posture of someone who is stuck. You behave in ways that reinforce that narrative. Your brain, ever obedient, will look for confirmation of those beliefs and filter out anything that contradicts them. That's not psychology. That's neurology. That's the way perception works. But imagine this. You change your language just slightly. Instead of saying, "I'm stuck," you say, "I'm at a difficult turning point." Instead of, "I've failed," you say, "I'm learning through consequences." That's not denial. That's precision. That's refusing to let emotion hijack your vocabulary. Because when you describe your reality more accurately, you see more clearly. And when you see more clearly, you make better choices. Language is not merely a reflection of thought. It's a tool that sculpts thought. And that tool either sharpens your clarity or blunts your power. Start paying attention to how you speak. Not just in public, but in your own mind, in the silent narration of your day. Do you use words that assume defeat? Do you generalize, always, never, everyone, nothing ever changes? Those words are the enemies of progress. They exaggerate the problem and obscure the solution. When you say, "Nothing I do ever works," your mind doesn't hear that as an expression of frustration. It hears it as a command, a belief to enforce. And then it shows you all the evidence that supports that belief. You trap yourself in your own narrative, not because it's true, but because it's the one you keep telling. So change the story. Speak with precision. Speak in a way that leaves room for growth, for resilience, for hope grounded in responsibility. Say, "I'm struggling, but I'm working on it." Say, "I'm overwhelmed, but I'm prioritizing." These are not affirmations. They're honest, pragmatic acknowledgments of where you are and where you're aiming. They align your thoughts with your values instead of your fears. And over time, that changes your emotional landscape. Because your nervous system responds not just to events, but to interpretations of those events. And those interpretations are driven by language. Use your words like a scalpel, not a hammer. Carve a path forward, even when your emotions try to cloud your judgment. In times of struggle, what you say to yourself is not just commentary, it's command. Train your inner voice to be the architect of your future, not the echo of your past. Pain is inevitable, but suffering, prolonged, paralyzing suffering, that's often optional. It's the consequence not only of what happens to us, but of how we frame what happens. People endure trauma, betrayal, loss, abandonment, and in those moments they are overwhelmed. That's understandable. But the question that ultimately determines the trajectory of their life is not, "Why did this happen to me?" It's, "What will I do with this now that it has happened?" That's the axis around which your future turns. Because pain, if left unchecked, will rot you from the inside. It will fester. It will infect how you see yourself, others, even life itself. But pain, if harnessed properly, if interrogated, understood, and directed, can become purpose. You must not forget that you are the inheritor of a long, brutal human lineage that faced the darkness of existence without flinching. And yet now, even the smallest discomfort threatens to destabilize your entire identity. That's not weakness. It's misdirection. It's the product of a culture that teaches people to avoid pain at all costs, rather than extract meaning from it. Pain, properly confronted, is the map. It tells you where the wound is. It tells you what matters to you. It reveals the gap between where you are and where you could be. When someone breaks your heart, it's not just the loss of the person that hurts. It's the shattering of your assumptions, the disruption of your identity, the unraveling of a future you were building in your mind. But that disruption is also information. It forces you to examine what you gave away, where you abandoned yourself, what you tolerated for too long. And if you don't let that pain drive you to bitter conclusions, if you resist the urge to become cynical, it can make you sharper, wiser, more dangerous in the best possible way. You have to let the pain educate you, not crush you. Let it make you more discerning, not more closed. Let it give you empathy with boundaries, not blind forgiveness. When you carry your pain properly, like a weight you chose to bear, you transform it into strength. But if you refuse to learn from it, if you remain trapped in a narrative of injustice without responsibility, you'll carry it like a victim, and that weight will only grow heavier. This is where your agency returns. When you decide that the pain will not own you, but instead become the raw material from which you build a better, more conscious self. That doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means refusing to let the injury define your future. And part of that transformation requires boundaries. Real boundaries. Not walls made of fear or avoidance, but structures of psychological clarity that define where you end and others begin. Too often, people confuse kindness with self-abandonment. They believe love is proved through endurance. They endure neglect. They endure manipulation. They endure betrayal. And they call it compassion. But that is not compassion, it's confusion. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And the moment you internalize that truth, You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that you forgot existed. Boundaries are the architecture of peace. They are the scaffolding upon which love and trust can actually stand. Without them, relationships become arenas of exploitation. You give too much, hoping they'll see your worth. But people do not respect what is endlessly available. They respect what is protected, what is owned, what is sacred. And your emotional, physical, and mental space, those are sacred. The act of saying no, the act of stepping back, of withdrawing your energy from what depletes you, is not selfish. It is necessary. It is a signal to your subconscious that you are no longer willing to negotiate your worth. But you must understand, boundaries will cost you something. They will disrupt dysfunctional dynamics. They will upset people who benefited from your lack of them. They will force you into new patterns that feel uncomfortable at first, because self-sacrifice was your default. But comfort is not the goal. Integrity is. Peace is. Authenticity is. And you cannot achieve those things if you're constantly betraying yourself for the illusion of harmony. Think of boundaries like rules in a game. If there are no rules, the game devolves into chaos. There's no fairness, no structure, no direction. The same goes for your life. If you don't decide what's acceptable and what isn't, someone else will. And they won't do it in your best interest. They'll do it to serve their own needs. Your life needs order. And boundaries create that order. They tell the world, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is what I will not allow. That clarity invites the right people in and pushes the wrong ones out. The irony is, the more you honor your boundaries, the more capacity you have for real compassion. Not the kind that erases yourself, but the kind that honors both your humanity and theirs. You become grounded, not reactive. You give from a place of fullness, not depletion. And that shift, when you stop living in emotional chaos and start cultivating psychological order, is the beginning of real transformation. You stop feeling like a victim of your relationships and begin to feel like a participant, a creator. You stop simply surviving and begin constructing a life that reflects your deepest values. That is the power of boundaries. That is the wisdom born from pain. That is the path forward. There is a common and dangerous misconception that you must feel motivated in order to act. That somehow, the stars must align emotionally before you can begin to take responsibility for your life. But that belief is not only false, it is destructive. Motivation is a fleeting and unreliable guide. It's a product of emotion, and emotion is unstable, easily manipulated by external conditions, and often oriented toward short-term comfort rather than long-term fulfillment. If you wait to feel like doing what is necessary, you will wait forever. The truth is, you must act despite how you feel. Because discipline is what rescues you when your emotional state betrays you. Discipline is the choice to subordinate your immediate desires to the structure of a higher aim. It is the decision to confront resistance and persist anyway. And that's where character is forged, not in moments of inspiration, but in moments of discomfort, repetition, fatigue. You get up early, even when you're tired. You show up to the task, even when it's tedious. You continue the work, even when no one is clapping. That's where transformation happens. And what's remarkable is that action itself begins to generate the very motivation you thought you needed at the start. Action precedes emotion. You clean one corner of your room, just one. You write one paragraph. You go on one short walk. And suddenly you feel a little more alive, a little more focused, a little more capable. That's because your identity is shaped not by what you feel, but by what you do. Each act of discipline reinforces a narrative. I am the kind of person who follows through. And over time, that narrative takes root. It becomes your self-image. And from that self-image comes confidence, not from affirmations, not from external validation, but from integrity. Confidence is the memory of your own competence. It's what happens when you stack up enough evidence, day after day, that you can rely on yourself. And that is far more durable than the hollow surge of fleeting motivation. You must stop seeing discipline as a punishment and begin seeing it as the path to freedom. People often mistake freedom for the absence of restriction. But freedom, in its truest form, is the ability to act in alignment with your values, even when every part of you wants to give in to ease. The addict is not free. The chronic procrastinator is not free. The person ruled by their emotional whims is not free. They are enslaved to impulse. Real freedom comes when you are no longer a servant to your moods, but a master of your choices. And this becomes even more important when you realize how much your environment influences you. The people you surround yourself with, the media you consume, the spaces you inhabit, these are not neutral. They shape your thoughts, your habits, your beliefs, often without your awareness. If you are surrounded by chaos, you will absorb that chaos. If the people in your life constantly complain, make excuses, and reject responsibility, that mindset becomes normalized. You begin to think that mediocrity is acceptable, that cynicism is wisdom, that hope is naivete. But you don't have to accept that. You can choose to curate your environment with the same precision you would apply to any life-defining decision. Start with your physical space. Clean it, organize it, beautify it, even in the smallest ways. Why? Because how you treat your space is often how you treat your mind. A room filled with disorder subtly tells you that your life is out of control. A room that reflects order reminds you that you are capable of restoring it. Then look at your digital environment. What voices are you allowing into your mind every day? What narratives are shaping your perception of yourself and the world? If you consume content that glamorizes victimhood, nihilism, or perpetual outrage, don't be surprised when your worldview begins to mirror that dysfunction. Your attention is a limited resource, and where you place it determines the kind of person you become. Be vigilant. Protect it. Redirect it toward sources that challenge you, that call you upward, that force you to confront uncomfortable truths instead of soothing you with comforting lies. Finally, audit your relationships. This isn't about cutting people off impulsively, but about recognizing patterns. Are the people around you helping you become stronger, wiser, more courageous? Or are they reinforcing your worst habits, validating your excuses, and anchoring you to a version of yourself you've outgrown? Relationships are not merely social. They are psychological ecosystems. And if your ecosystem is toxic, no matter how much internal work you do, you'll struggle to grow. Because the environment always pushes back. This is not about perfection. It's about alignment. Aligning your habits, your choices, your surroundings, and your relationships with the vision of the person you are striving to become. And when you do that, when discipline becomes your anchor and your environment becomes your ally, you no longer have to rely on fleeting emotions to guide you. You become internally directed. You rise slowly and steadily into a life that reflects your values instead of your fears. And that is the only kind of life worth building. Now is your moment. Not tomorrow. Not when it's easier. Now. This is your invitation to stop replaying the problem and start participating in the solution. You are not stuck. You are standing at the edge of your next breakthrough. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What solution are you committing to today? Let this be a space where we learn from each other, where your voice matters. If you found value in this, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It fuels the mission of reaching those who need it most. And tell me, what topics do you want us to dive into next? Your experiences inspire the next conversation. Let's keep growing together.